red berry with a softish pit inside.
Okay.
Super good on vitamin C.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. Have we begun already? Excellent. So,
right.
Hey guys, this is Gary McDougall from Grow the Food You Love, and I'm here today with Christina from Organic Gardener's Pantry, and I wanted to have her on today to talk about, to speak to people who are gardening and want to grow, more vegetables. They want to grow successfully. Maybe they have pest problems. We're going to speak about that today, and I wanted to talk to Christina also because I buy amendments from her when my plants aren't just the way I think they should be. I talk to her, I get advice from her, and I thought, instead of just talking to her behind the scenes, why don't we put her on camera and maybe answer some of your questions and help you grow better. So one of the things I really respect about you and I really like about what you had on your website when I looked you up is you say a really important thing is to get organic matter in your garden to grow successfully. Do you want to start with that and
that's
just go from there?
Yeah, then because it all boils down to the soil, and if the soil is not healthy and biodiverse and has a lot of organic matter in it, then gardening is more challenging, and people come and will talk to you about their terrible soil and how nothing grows, when in fact the most important three things to start with, way before you buy amendments and fertilizers and measure pH and do all that stuff, the first three things are making sure the soil has enough organic matter, mulch on top, organic matter inside. We can look at what that looks like. Secondly, microbes, because all that organic matter is food for microbes in the soil, myriads of tiny creatures that break it all down and make it into plant food. And then the third one is water, moisture. I call it the 3 M's, mulch, microbes, and moisture. And without water, nothing happens. And without water, no biological processes can happen. The microbes are water as part of their bodies, and they need water to be able to munch down all that organic stuff.
Yes.
So commonly people withhold water from lawns, letting it go brown and saying we have to save the resource. I agree with saving the resource, but on the other hand, the soil ecosystem needs water to function. And ironically, withholding water from the landscape will slowly cause the plants to starve, because they can't rely on the microbes making their food, because the microbes need water to work.
Yes.
So my garden gets water, my lawn gets about an inch a week, which is not excessive.
Okay.
But it means the grass is well fed and healthy and can outcompete the weeds. It's as easy as that.
And
yes. All my beds that are not lawn or veggie are covered basically in last fall's leaves. And we can have a look at what that looks like.
Yeah, I definitely want to look at it. That's something that I noticed while being here, is there's so much life in this space. And you talk about organic matter. I want you to tell us, you say you use leaves. So maybe you can show us and talk a little bit about what is mulch and what is organic matter, and so that people know what they need to put into their soil.
I believe they call them leaves because we're supposed to leave them.
Leaves because we leave them.
I don't have a whole lot of big trees, but I have a lot, and I basically let everything drop on the ground and leave it. I don't mulch. I don't use a leaf blower to remove anything. The only place that gets raked is the grass, and of course things like steps and decks. But down here you can see what I've put down last fall from the big leaf maple out front. And these are still leftovers, and you can see underneath the soil is still fairly dry, fairly moist and dark. It feels cool and fresh to the touch, and we haven't really had a good rain in about a week.
And I see a lot of bugs in there too.
And there's a lot of bugs in there too. So that's the macro fauna, the things you can see with your naked eye. But even more important, there's thousands and millions of species, let alone individuals, of bacteria and fungi and other things in the ground as well. They eat the leaves.
It's one of in the workshops I've held. It's one of the questions I do. I'll pick up some like really living dark soil, and I'll ask people like, how many living things do you think are in here? And people guess like 40 or 1,000. I'm like,
billions.
It's billions. It's amazing. So that the earth, when we take care of it, is actually alive. And when we put things like mulch or organic matter. And what are you showing us here?
And these are this sort of whitish stuff on the decaying fern fronds. That's fungi breaking down the lignins in the structure of the leaf, and that happens everywhere. Wherever there's stalks and branches and woody materials, fungi come in and eat that, and then they build organic matter, enrich the soil with carbon and nutrients. So this is all happening for free without us needing to do much except leave it alone. And then the other thing is I scrounge leaves from my neighbors' back alleys and places. And I also do something that I call rip and flip. When I have a weed or in this case, a tree seedling don't want to keep,
Yeah.
I rip it out and then
Yeah.
I drop it.
Nice.
And I flip it and I drop it on the ground.
Yeah.
And I really don't take much material out of this garden because I try to recycle in place almost anything I can.
Yeah.
Only things like morning glory roots and usually problematic weeds with seeds on them, they
Yeah.
leave. They go into the
take them away.
compost. But
Yeah.
everything else is basically just staying.
So this is the fascinating thing that I found with working with nature is instead of just thinking immediately to like an NPK fertilizer, I'm
Yeah.
thinking put organic matter on the soil.
Yeah.
Let the microbes eat it.
Yes.
Let the fungi break it down.
Yes.
They're breaking down that organic matter, which releases the nutrients for the plants,
Yeah.
which helps the plants then to grow.
And it's slow food. It's not that NPK isn't important, but it's not the first thing to do when you think fertility and biodiversity. It's really about put some organic matter down, make sure there is enough moisture for the microbes to eat it. The microbes will in most cases be there anyway or come in on the material.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like slow horizontal, slow food composting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's also very low maintenance. I mean, if you want to talk money, it costs a lot less. If a landscaper or your service has to only like chop and drop things in place rather than take them away and pay the fee at the dump and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So you're doing this here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do the same thing in your food garden where you're growing the vegetables?
In the food garden, I do it in places I don't have anything growing, so I usually have a leaf layer through the winter. Maybe my leeks and my big old cabbages can poke through.
Yeah.
In the spring, that's the one place where I rake stuff away because the food garden needs to warm up. The soil in the food garden needs to warm up, and I also need to access it physically in order to put seeds down.
Yeah.
So that's the one place I rake off the leaves and I let the soil be exposed to the sun and warm up.
Okay.
But as soon as stuff starts growing, I actually and also I plant really densely, so there's not a whole lot of exposed soil.
Yeah.
But also I sneak some mulch back on there once the seedlings are up and strong and big.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what things do you use for mulch? Would that be leaves again?
Still leaves. Also, in terms of mulch, you can use grass clippings in small amounts.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind that the grass clippings are also needed in the grass ecosystem. So
Yeah.
as much as possible, leave the clippings. But if you have a glut of them, say in April, May, June, when there's a lot of growth happening, that can go onto the veggie garden in a layer between 1 inch and 2 thick, no more. Because if it's on too thick, then it can actually mat and prevent water. And
I got to just make a quick comment.
Yeah.
In the fall, when I see everybody raking up their leaves and putting it curbside so that the city can come and take away, I
Yes.
feel so backwards because as I'm driving my kids to school, I'm picking up these bags of leaves to
Yes,
bring them home
I do the
as
same.
organic matter.
Yeah.
And so many gardeners do that.
Yeah.
So it's really, I find you start creating a relationship with your own earth, with the planet, and bringing life back to it. So
yeah, I try because in the long run, the less inputs we have to bring into the garden from outside,
Yeah.
the more we can recycle on site, the better.
Yeah.
Not every garden is as big as this one. A lot of the new buildings would be like 80% of the square footage of the lot is suddenly paved over or building, and
Yeah.
there's a small yard left, and it can't probably accommodate all the leaves. But where there's space, for sure.
Yes.
And also the city collecting the leaves, they give them back to people.
Yeah.
I think there's free piles of fermented, pre-composted leaves in Beacon Hill Park in the spring, so
Yeah.
by all means go get some and put them back on.
Yeah, I think
Also
that's great.
great in the veggie garden.
Yes. So can we maybe go over to the veggie garden? The thought I had was, after organic matter, at what point do you start thinking about adding your amendments? One of the things that comes to mind is I was looking at my vegetables this year, and I was hoping that I'd made the soil so well, I'd been composting so much, but some of my plants were showing signs of they weren't quite right. They weren't as green as I thought. And you had asked me on the phone, are they yellow leaves or are they
Yeah.
purple leaves?
Yes.
And I said, I'd actually seen purple leaves this
Interesting.
year.
Yeah.
And your
So,
response was,
purple could be, in all likelihood, could be a sign of phosphorus deficiency.
okay,
So phosphorus carriers would be things like liquid fish,
yeah,
or a bit of the seaweed also has phosphorus in it, bone meal has phosphorus in it. Also, interestingly, there's one of the microbes in the ground, in particular the mycorrhizal fungi,
Yeah.
are the ones that can liberate phosphorus from rock and from organic matter and make that available to plants.
Yeah.
So an indirect way to ensure that the plant doesn't have phosphorus deficiency is to provide mycorrhizal fungi into the planting hole when you plant.
right,
And that would prevent that. And the third factor is simply climate and temperature, because soil life needs warm soil to be most active, and while the soils are too cold, even if you have the fungi present, they might not be working very hard yet. They're
Okay.
just sitting and waiting. So
Yes.
that's why it's also important to not push the envelope, plant at the time that the soil is actually
At the
warm
proper
enough.
time.
Yeah.
So this is something that I'm noticing right now. In our greenhouse, I have volunteer squash. And
Yes.
these plants are like, one of them's like 6 to 10 feet long and has so many squash coming on it.
Yeah.
But my squash plant that I transplanted out like June 1st is only about this big. And it's only got a couple little leaves on it.
See? Yeah.
So,
Temperature.
and cucumber as well. It's really tiny, but in the greenhouse, it's 2 to 3 times the size.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's like,
That's
even though
that.
it's, what are we, early June here,
Yeah.
but I still feel like it's cold out.
It's cold out.
colder at night as well. It's like
Yes.
getting colder than 10 degrees.
And the wind is a big factor as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
so not pushing the envelope, reading those signs, and so what I had gotten from you is I got the mycorrhizal fungi, and I got the fish, and I got the kelp, but I'm still seeing signs that maybe it's still a little bit too cold. So
Could be.
I could be pushing the envelope a little bit.
You could just have to wait.
Yeah.
So, but that's actually a good segue, because after doing the first step, which has to do with the microbes, the mulch, and the moisture, the second step would be to go to these so-called broad spectrum fertilizers,
Okay.
where you have a huge array of different nutrients in small amounts each. So it's not a big bag of 20-20-20 NPK, which
Yeah.
is quite like a heavy gun.
Yeah.
And instead have this kind of whole food idea where you get all your nutrients but in tiny amounts, none
Yeah.
of them in too large concentrations.
Yeah.
And the flip side of that is, of course, you avoid pollution, because whatever is there in excess in the soil and the plants don't pick up,
Yeah.
if it's not held on organic matter, it will wash away. It will just
Right.
disappear and cause pollution.
Okay.
So that's another good way to go about it, is to turn to liquid kelp, seaweed products, some liquid fish, maybe some rock dust, to fix deficiencies, to see if that helps bring the color into the leaves and the size into the fruit and the ripeness and the taste.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about, looking at pH, looking at availability of nutrients, and maybe choosing fertilizers such as rock phosphate or lime is kind of in my head, that's step 3. That's like the last thing.
Okay.
Even though in most garden books this is addressed first and foremost.
Yeah.
But I think that could be the icing on the cake if we have looked after our 3 M's, mulch, moisture, microbes,
Yeah.
and if we have tried the full spectrum fertilizers for trace elements as well as main elements, main
Yeah.
nutrients. And then if that all has been done and it's just a tiny little bit extra you want, then you can go for, or maybe even do a soil test, but also you could try things like rock phosphate. Both phosphorus and calcium are actually one of the most obvious and often problem-causing deficiencies,
Yeah.
and they are both supplied with rock phosphate, calcium
Okay.
and phosphorus.
Nice. Okay. Something I was thinking about while you were saying that was I'm just thinking about our garden and the plants that are growing, and about how I think chemical fertilizers, you're saying 20-20-20. I'd heard recently that if it's chemical based or petroleum based, that it will kill the living organisms in the soil.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So instead of I used to just think about getting fertilizers, and I think what brought me to the Organic Gardener's Pantry was I was watching something that Phil, the original owner,
Right.
he was talking about things like compost teas, and
Yes.
so taking compost and getting those the microbes, the bacteria in the compost, and multiplying it by feeding
Yes.
it something and aerating it and bringing life back to it. But we want to keep that life in the soil, and we
Yeah.
want to feed that life.
Right.
So it's really like we want to create a relationship with the bacteria, with the organic matter, with the fungi,
Yeah.
all these things, to make that soil come alive, to make the plants come alive. So it's taking like more of a whole systems approach
Yeah.
versus just reducing it down to NPK fertilizer, the 20-20-20.
Precisely.
Yeah.
I mean, microbes are people too. They have the same needs that we do. They want to eat, they want to drink, they want to breathe. They're
Yeah.
aerobes. They need air in the soil.
Yeah.
And then they want to be just left alone to do their thing. And
Yeah.
so they're an underground free work crew that works for us without making much demands otherwise.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different approach, because how many people will be happy and comfortable thinking about microorganisms? Most of the time we've been conditioned to think of them as pathogens and something you would use antibacterial soap and scrub them off.
Yeah.
But actually without microbes we wouldn't be on the planet. We wouldn't have any food to eat. The soil wouldn't be alive. The plants couldn't do so well. They need microbes as we do to defend themselves. They get a lot of symbiotic benefits from living with microbes. Different bacteria do different things for them. The mycorrhizal fungi help with things like with specific things like phosphorus, but also nitrogen and also water and also trace elements. So we're just, and it's so exciting right now to be an organic gardener because we're learning also the new developments in soil science, where people are catching on to the fact that not all microbes are bad, and in fact a lot of them are not only beneficial but actually absolutely important for survival
of our species.
Of our
this
species.
is what I'm so passionate about is we might, like our future generations might depend on us bringing life back to this planet, because tilling the soil and washing the topsoil away, habitats being destroyed because of that. We might run out of soil if we continue with big agriculture, tilling soil, using these chemical fertilizers.
It is luckily a renewable resource. We can reverse it. We can bring it back to life. It takes a little bit of time and a whole different kind of practice, but it's possible.
Yes.
And just like we're getting comfortable with the thought of the human microbiome and all the good bacteria in our guts and on our skin and everywhere, we can transpose that easily into the gardens, the landscapes, and the agricultural landscape.
Yes. I'm just thinking of the trillions of life that are here. I want to take a quick look at your garden, just because when I'm looking at your vegetables, like your potatoes here and your garlic.
The garlic,
And
so
other things, like things are growing.
It's a shared garden, and we each have different plots. I have the potatoes this year.
Okay.
It's we just work on the soil. We're mostly soil gardeners, and then we throw the crops in, and they look after themselves if the soil supports them.
Yes.
And I'm perfectly happy also to think pollinators. I leave things like the forget-me-nots and the comfrey, the small one. Comfrey can be a thug, so I'm not advocating for planting comfrey in a garden. You might never get rid of it again.
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm happy with a small sort of stand of comfrey. The bumblebees are absolutely in love with the flowers. They also pollinate my tomatoes.
Yeah.
So what's not to like? And and we know that without insects we'll be hooped anyway. And the insects are in dire straits.
Well, that's something that people I find are fascinated with bringing like bees back, and like the mason bees. And I went to a person's house and did an install there. They had honeybees, and afterwards we were eating honey right from the comb. That's something I'd never done before. It was amazing.
And then think of the hundreds and thousands of other species that are wild pollinators, and that goes all the way down to bats, or up to bats and hummingbirds and such.
Yeah.
So bumblebees and honeybees are the big ones that everybody knows, and then there's all the other ones, the wild guys, the